World of Warcraft has forever changed the world of online gaming. In the mid-2000s, it captured the hearts and minds of millions of players when many were worried that PC gaming might be on its way out. Its launch shattered expectations. It set the gold standard for MMO design, and many features that were revolutionary when the game launched are now simply expected. Players were introduced to the Blizzard take on the MMO genre. They kindled friendships and began to expect more than just a single box game from developers. And WoW was huge in an era when it became socially acceptable to be what had previously been taboo, a nerd. For the owners of the over 100 million accounts that have logged in, WoW is many things. A constant reminder of earlier days, an occasional dalliance when a new expansion drops, or a continued passion. For those who haven't, it can be confusing to hear others talk about it. But whether or not you've ever loved the game, its story helped shape an industry. It changed the way people thought about success in video games and fought its way into the cultural consciousness. This is the story of World of Warcraft. The World of Warcraft would not exist without Warcraft. Featuring a war between orcs and humans, Blizzard Entertainment's first real-time strategy game sold 100,000 copies within a year of its 1994 release and won several awards, making it the company's first massive hit.
Warcraft 1 was such a hit that Blizzard really became a known developer. Everybody in the industry went, wow, it became Game of the Year, and that raised a lot of eyebrows. And the second year, they weren't any longer the new kid on the block.
Warcraft was not the first RTS, but it managed to carve out its own niche. The characters in its story were compelling, and the game's single-player campaign was written to weave together a coherent narrative about the game's world at large. The setting was undoubtedly fantasy, but with its own high magic touches. Humans, dwarves, and elves fought orcs, ogres, and trolls. But planet-spanning portals and demons also coexisted with gnomish and goblin technology, while crusading paladins clashed with unholy death knights. That world was, increasingly, the brainchild of Chris Metzen, who had been hired in 1993 by Blizzard to provide art.
I remember, this was hundreds of years ago, a chap by the name of Chris Metzen came in, and he walked into my office, and he noticed that I had a lot of D&D stuff on the walls, and so he and I were immediately connected there, geeks.
I put some of my drawings down on the desk, and he went and got the boss, a guy named Alan Adham, and he invited me back. We talked for a little bit, and he asked me if I wanted a job, and I told him that I would sweep his floors. You know, I just knew that the place I'd walked into and all the people that I met that day, like that was, it was home.
And by Warcraft 2, Metzen was not only providing the art for the series, but helping to shape and define the world in which it was set. And as the conflict on Azeroth expanded in Warcraft 3, so too did the digital world's geography, and Metzen was made the game's creative director.
All the artists, we played Warcraft 1 and Warcraft 2, but we had all these questions about the world. So we bugged Chris so much, and he broke out these acrylic paints. We looked at him and we're like, what are you painting? And he painted a map of Azeroth on the wall. And it was just his way of saying, guys, this is the map of the world. He just did it.
Warcraft 3 and its expansion, The Frozen Throne, were also critical and commercial successes. But so far, Azeroth had only been seen from above, from the general's view.
We dreamed about bringing Warcraft to life, so instead of being the top-down real-time strategy game, you would actually just be a character running around and battling and teaming up with your friends to fight increasingly difficult bad guys. That was sort of a dream that wasn't really in reach until Origin came out with Ultima Online.
Online RPGs had existed in different forms, including text-based and multi-user dungeons for some time. But when Ultima Online released as the first MMORPG in 1997, it gave many, including Blizzard, a look at what online gaming could eventually become. Blizzard's employees were watching.
I remember installing it on my work computer, expecting that I was just going to take a quick look at it. I ended up staying all night long playing Ultima Online and never left my office chair and never slept that night.
The MMORPG formula was further expanded by games like EverQuest. Blizzard began development on World of Warcraft even as work on Warcraft 3 continued. Announced in 2001, the game was internally scheduled for a 2004 release, and the goal was familiar: take a genre with clear potential and give it widespread appeal. That meant a more intuitive game with a clear sense of direction, which in turn meant guiding the player through the leveling experience. That required quests from the moment the player was logged in until they achieved max level, instead of expecting players to find enemies and grind by killing them before moving on to other foes. But that was a massive undertaking.
I never in a million years dreamed that we'd build the bones of a world in hills and trees and rivers.
I don't think anybody had any idea, really, how many people or how much time it was going to take to make World of Warcraft. People started to realize, okay, if we're really going to hit these goals, we're going to have to add more people. So the team started to grow.
We realized our estimate of doing 500 quests just isn't going to cut it. We're going to have to do like 5 times that for this game to be awesome.
The rapidly expanding Blizzard team was hard-pressed to finish the game on time, but on November 23, 2004, World of Warcraft was released to the world. World of Warcraft's beta test had shown solid interest from players. After Warcraft 3, they wanted more Sylvanas, more Thrall, more Jaina, but even Blizzard couldn't account for just how much people wanted more of them.
We got off the freeway and there were police everywhere. There were crowds of people walking down the street. It looked like Mardi Gras.
Really was this moment that united people who'd been fans of the Warcraft RTS franchise, seized this excitement for the MMO genre, really opening up what had been a relatively niche genre to the broader audience of gamers from all walks of life, all ages, all backgrounds. It became something of a cultural moment.
Day one, we were actually shouting for correct numbers because the numbers that were coming in were so large that we thought that they were incorrect numbers and that the monitoring that we had in place was bogus.
The technical side of providing servers had been carefully planned, but all those projections went out the window.
One of the things they felt really strongly about was not to sell more boxes of the game than we could support on our servers that we had at the time, because they didn't want people to have a bad experience where the servers were bogged down, you couldn't log in. And it turns out all of those boxes that we had projected to last for a couple of months sold out within a day or two.
Blizzard may have been watching Ultima Online in 1997, but in 2004, the rest of the gaming industry was watching Blizzard. And those who logged in found themselves with a whole new perspective on Azeroth, with beautiful vistas in a vibrant world, engaging combat and questing, and social aspects that were simply brand new to most players. World of Warcraft pulled players into an expansive fantasy world where they were the heroes, confronting everything from bandits to dragons with sword, bow, and spell. What lay over the next hill or in that cave was a mystery. It was adventure that defined the player experience. What did you do in World of Warcraft in 2004? Whatever you wanted. Not only were a lot of people playing the game, but they were paying a monthly fee to do so. WoW would go on to hit the 1 million player mark within a few months.
It was truly amazing as how big a success it became. I think that caught everyone off guard. I mean, we all thought, okay, hey, this thing could get 1 million players here. I mean, this is really special. But when it went up to 5, 6, 8, 9, 10 million worldwide, it was just unbelievable.
WoW's widespread success had more than just a commercial impact. Despite some early issues with server capacity, the game was well received by fans, many of whom found the combat and world more engaging than previous games in the MMORPG genre. But once they leveled their character from level 1 to 60, the game became balanced around group content. That meant player versus environment content like dungeons and 40-person raids, but also player versus player activities like battlegrounds and world PvP. With their friends and often complete strangers, players in World of Warcraft were forced to find allies if they wanted to tackle the game's toughest content. The game's in-game organization, the Guild, became the primary method for finding them. Voice communication servers sprung up to support the level of organization needed to overcome challenging raid bosses.
I'm coming up with 32.33, repeating of course, percentage of survival.
Oh, it's a lot better than we usually do.
Alright, chums up.
Ready, guys?
Let's do this. Leroy Dragons!
Oh my god, he just ran in.
Save him! Oh, geez, stick to the plan!
Oh, Jesus. Let's go. Stick to the plan, chums! Oh my god.
God damn it, Leroy!
Fans compiled information and strategies and created an internet community around the game.
Hey guys, and thanks for tuning in to Trade Chat. My name's Panzerborn of Zormus, and today's video is my opinion on why World of Warcraft isn't going anywhere anytime soon.
This is World of Warcraft Radio. My name is Total Biscuit, and I have to fill 2 hours with talk and general drivel.
Alright, so Fenris quit the guild because he ended up getting a job and a family and some other worthless stuff. Wow, what a nerd!
While being social and interacting with other players had been a welcome curiosity as players leveled, it became an absolute necessity at endgame. And that meant players forged friendships online at a time when that wasn't the norm.
This has probably happened where players have met online and then subsequently become involved. Have you ever taken advantage of that?
My wife would object.
How did you meet your wife?
Playing World of Warcraft.
You met your wife playing World of Warcraft?
I did.
Those online bonds would cross over into reality when Blizzard held the first BlizzCon in 2005. At any BlizzCon, the hotel lobbies surrounding the convention ring with the laughter of guildies meeting in person yet again, or for the first time, to celebrate their successes and perpetuate inside jokes. It was no longer just a game or a hobby, but a community.
I'm going up the escalator, and as I'm getting to the top, I just yell, "For the Horde!" And the whole audience lights up. For the Horde! For the Horde! For the Horde! You hear, "For the Alliance! For the Alliance! Go for the..." And they just start, raging on each other. How cool is that?
This is these people's lives. I mean, some of these people came from all over the country, all over the world to come together to meet some of these players that they've met in the game.
There was one other thing that made WoW such a massive success upon its release. In the mid-2000s, things that were nerdy were slowly becoming, well, cool. Whether it was film, books,
"You're a wizard, Harry."
"I'm a what?"
or gaming.
So Carly, do we need to make you a character? I think I have some basics.
Oh, no need. I'll just play my character, Avangard Dorado. She's a level 15 Elven Ranger, Steward of the Forest, and Silent Huntress.
It was safer than ever to be a nerd, which meant more people logging into Azeroth as players introduced their friends to the game. There was just one issue. You had to have a PC to play WoW. And PC gaming wasn't looking too healthy at the time of WoW's release. Some were already predicting that the next generation of consoles would wipe out PC gaming entirely. Though other Blizzard games like Diablo or StarCraft also played a role, WoW was a big part of the PC platform's continued relevance to gamers during this time period. Gamers built, bought, or begged for PCs so they too could be part of Azeroth. And as the game continued to flourish, celebrities started to admit that they too enjoyed World of Warcraft.
I was playing World of Warcraft at the time, and I had my priorities straight.
Wait a minute. You were home. It's not like you weren't home. You were home, but you were playing World of Warcraft, and the phone rings, and you're like, "I'll get that later"?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, how fanatical are you about video games?
Let's just say that I had to quit the game for a good going on year now.
Which one?
World of Warcraft.
Vin Diesel was a big fan, even playing it with Paul Walker in this clip.
That's actually how me and Vin Diesel became friends, was I was on Fast 7 and his sister found out that I play World of Warcraft. And so every night after filming, we would go over to his place and set up computers on other sides of the room, be like, "Okay, we're gonna go to this dungeon, we're gonna go do this." And we
That's what Vin Diesel does in his off time too?
Yes.
There are almost too many others to count. The late actor Robin Williams, apparently a big fan, was even memorialized in the game after his death. And WoW began to appear, first on the internet, but then eventually in other media, as an actual cultural reference instead of an offhand comment in an interview.
This role-playing game, out in 2004, returns to the world of Azeroth, where heroes like Leroy Jenkins do battle. And that would be the world of Warcraft.
I swear it's like he's a rogue and I'm a mage and we're part of the same guild. But secretly, he's worked with the Alliance to undermine us.
For the Horde.
For the Horde?
WoW was having a moment, and Blizzard understood that, leaning into the game's popularity to make commercials that featured actors you wouldn't expect for a mid-2000s PC game.
Hello, I'm William Shatner, and I'm a shaman. I'm a conduit of the ancient forces of nature.
Them smack-talking fools been saying Mr. T can't change the world of Warcraft. He ain't no computer hacker. Well, answer me this, suckers. How do you explain the Mohawk grenade?
There are 10 million people in the world of Warcraft because Chuck Norris allows them to live. I'm Chuck Norris, and I approve this game. World of Warcraft.
In China, as Blizzard looked to expand to the country's massive audience, they even made a commercial featuring pop idols and famous athletes in partnership with Coca-Cola. And though the game had to have slight visual modifications to comply with China's laws about violence and blood, it was a huge hit.
In the years around Burning Crusade, this is when you really started to see the adoption in Asia and in Europe that made World of Warcraft not just an American phenomenon, but a global phenomenon.
The beautiful thing about a game like World of Warcraft is that it crosses cultures very well. In China, for example, internet cafes are so popular. It's always been a one-child policy. Kids, they don't have siblings, so then they need to go to a place where they can get that social interaction. It's an experience.
为了部落，为了联盟，为了部落。我们联盟是高贵的，所以为了联盟。魔兽世界，耶！
The game, though well received, was not a static entity. It was a service. Content updates would bring new challenges and adventures to the player base. While patches were not unknown in the gaming world, these updates were substantial chunks of content, more akin to small games on their own. Blizzard would expand on World of Warcraft with several expansions, each bringing new features, races, and classes. The first two, the Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King, featured major characters from the Warcraft 3 storyline as antagonists. Both were well received, and the player base continued to grow throughout this period as heroes confronted fan favorites like Illidan and Arthas. The third expansion would be far more risky. In late 2010, with the release of Cataclysm, Blizzard put the devastation of Deathwing in-game, completely revamping zones that had existed in their original 2004 form. The dragon Deathwing would arise to not only threaten players, but destroy the planet itself.
The craziest thing about this franchise is that the world itself is probably the most key character. I mean, that's crazy, right? It's very, very cool. So the powerful idea with Cataclysm was, what if we imperiled the world you know?
But at last, the whole of Azeroth will break, and all will burn beneath the shadow of my wings.
Cataclysm was the first in a series of risks that Blizzard took with World of Warcraft. It was the first expansion to be truly controversial, and the period immediately before its release represented the peak of the game's subscriber numbers. The total crested 12 million. The initial reaction to the next expansion, Mists of Pandaria, was worse. Released in late 2012, this expansion attempted to introduce a new Asia-inspired visual style to the game, alongside jovial yet martial Pandaren. Though many who had played the expansion would testify that it was a step up from Cataclysm and a unique adventure worthy of the WoW name, many others viewed it with disdain and didn't even give it a chance. Warlords of Draenor brought players to an alternate reality, where the homeworld of the orcs had never been destroyed. But much of the planned content for the expansion was cut or reworked, and it featured a lengthy period of time at the end of the expansion where no new content was introduced.
Now, cut content is entirely normal in game development, and every expansion has a large amount of it. But with Warlords of Draenor, it began to encroach on the core experience.
Partway through that expansion, Blizzard released subscriber numbers for the very last time, revealing a 5.5 million number in a 2015 earnings call. Legion, released in August 2016, was a step away from experimentation and towards iteration. Illidan had returned, this time as an ally, and he stood in opposition to the demonic Burning Legion. While we don't have the subscription numbers, the game did experience its highest number of concurrent players since Cataclysm's launch. And the game's newest expansion, Battle for Azeroth, aims to continue that trend, refocusing the story on the age-old conflict between the Alliance and the Horde, a point of pride for many players.
We want to create amazing artwork or content or music or stories or quests, and to think that this game affected people is awesome and humbling.
We earnestly believe we're making something special.
Throughout all of WoW's history, the continuing storyline has been a huge draw for players. As Battle for Azeroth gets underway, Blizzard has again continued the storytelling for which they are famous.
Burn it. Burn it!
The controversy has sucked so many old players back in, while new adventurers flock to the banners of both the Alliance
Stand as one for the Alliance!
and the Horde. The game has adapted. In a world where streaming has exploded in popularity, Blizzard continues to support the game's PvP arena eSports scene. But perhaps correctly guessing that the player base skews towards PvE, they've also added the Mythic Dungeon Invitational.
I think one of the really cool things about this being the first time we are doing an esports PvE program in World of Warcraft is we'll be able to see if there's any differences under the pressure of the kind of live environment.
But some players don't want to adapt. They want to go back to what they felt in 2004, and Blizzard finally has responded.
Fans of World of Warcraft around the world, we hear you. I am pleased and also a little bit nervous to announce the development of a classic server option for World of Warcraft.
With WoW now in its nearly 14th year, it's hard to imagine it reaching the subscriber heights of 2010. Over that time, though, it has grossed over $9 billion in revenue as of January 2017. And with subscribers continuing to pay a monthly fee, Blizzard has shown no signs of slowing down development for their title.
As long as people play it, we always want to support this game. We never see a horizon.
There's really not a precedent that we can look to. I think that we're charting new territory.
There's no end to the experience. That's kind of one of the beautiful things about it.
Battle for Azeroth, the newest expansion, became the game's fastest selling ever. After nearly a decade and a half, it seems like the World of Warcraft will continue to exist as long as there are heroes willing to defend it. Thanks for watching. If you want more great content just like this, be sure to hit the subscribe button.